Highway 666. The road renamed, yet the curse never left. In the endless desert night, trucks and cars vanished without a trace. Whispers speak of the hells chasing lost souls, and radios carrying the cries of the dead. Frank Harlow was no stranger to the dark. 30 years behind the wheel of an interstate rig had taught him how silence on the midnight highway could twist a man's thoughts out of shape. But tonight felt different. The fastest route to his delivery forced him through a stretch of asphalt, once marked by a name drivers still spoke in hushed tones. Highway 666. The road signs had changed, the numbers replaced, but the memories and the rumors had not. Younger drivers whispered about headlights swallowed whole by the black, about scorched tire marks etched into the pavement as though clawed there by something unseen. Some swore they had glimpsed massive dogs, eyes glowing like burning coals, sprinting alongside 18-wheelers at 70 miles per hour. No proof was ever offered. No one laughed. That night, Frank pulled out of a rest stop just shy of midnight. His cab reeked of cigarettes and stale coffee. He flicked on the radio. Only static and garbled whispers met him. With a sigh, he switched it off, leaving nothing but the steady growl of the engine and the hiss of desert wind across the windshield. The highway stretched straight and merciless, desert shadows spreading on either side. An ocean of black with no light save for his twin yellowed beams cutting ahead. Frank sipped his coffee, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. Empty. Yet the weight of being followed clung to him, pressing harder with every mile. A memory surfaced. Years ago, a fellow driver had vanished on this very stretch. His truck was found abandoned on the shoulder, the cab torn to pieces. Inside, nothing. No blood. No body. Just claw marks raked deep into the asphalt, trailing off into the sand. Frank shook the image away, but the deeper he drove, the heavier the air seemed, as though something unseen pressed against the glass. His headlights barely pierced a few yards ahead before the night devoured them whole. He eased back on the throttle and lit another cigarette. Through the thin veil of smoke, something flickered on the shoulder ahead, two faint red glows. They flashed, vanished, then returned. Eyes. Aye. Frank blinked hard, his heart pounding. He pressed his foot down. The speedometer climbed. The engine howled. Still, in the corner of his vision, those two red lights lingered, keeping pace with effortless calm. His hands locked white-knuckled on the wheel. Highway 666, renamed or not, had never needed a sign to mark its territory. Some places don't need names to haunt you. And Frank knew with every mile he pushed deeper that he had driven straight into its heart. Numin. Alcohol. The clock read just past 1:00 a.m. Frank had driven more than 40 miles without passing a single pair of headlights. The desert silence seemed to swallow even the roar of his engine. He switched the radio back on, anything to drown the feeling that he was drifting into some endless black pit. At first it was only static, the familiar hiss and crackle. He reached for the dial to shut it off when something slid into the noise, a guttural growl, low and predatory, like an animal stalking unseen in the brush. Frowning, Frank twisted the tuner. The frequencies shifted, but the sound remained. Worse, it blended with something else, a voice. Help me. Frank froze. The words were faint, distorted, buried under layers of static, but unmistakable. He leaned closer to the radio, disbelieving. Then the cabin filled with overlapping cries, Screams calling out names, the shriek of brakes locking, the crunch of metal twisting on impact. The truck seemed to vibrate in sympathy with the sounds. Frank gripped the wheel tighter, eyes darting to the rearview mirror. For the briefest flash, he caught it, something slipping through the edge of his taillights. 4 legs, a stretched body, eyes burning red. When he looked again, the road was empty. The radio wailed with one long, piercing note, then fell silent. Frank inhaled sharply, palms damp with sweat. The old stories clawed at his mind. Drivers who swore their radios had come alive before the crash, replaying their own voices, pleading, screaming, begging. His headlights flickered. Along the right shoulder, a few dozen yards away, 2 shapes loped beside his rig. Not dogs. Not anything he had words for. Their backs rose as high as the cab's windows, their fur bristling black and gray, eyes glowing like coals whipped by wind. Frank slammed his foot down. The speedometer climbed, the wheels screamed against the asphalt, sparks bursting in his mirrors. But the shadows never fell behind. They held their distance, pacing him with effortless precision, as if toying with him. Then the radio snapped on again. A new voice emerged, rasping, frantic, gasping for breath. "They're coming. They won't stop." Frank's stomach turned to ice. He knew the voice. It was his own. The cab grew colder, desert air outside forgotten, replaced by a chill that cut to the bone. Frank's eyes locked on the endless stretch of blacktop, but his heart understood the truth. He was no longer alone on Highway 666. The clock ticked past 1 in the morning. The highway ahead devoured his headlights whole. No gas stations, no signs, no other travelers. Frank felt as though he were driving inside a loop with no exit, a stretch of road repeating itself forever. The engine's steady growl was no longer the loudest sound in the cab. From the radio came a storm of voices. Pleas for help layered over the shriek of brakes, the crunch of tearing metal, and beneath it all, a guttural growl that crawled under his skin. This time, Frank didn't reach for the dial. He knew the truth. The radio would come alive whether he wanted it to or not. In the rearview mirror, the darkness stretched, unbroken. Then, a spark of red. Eyes, another pair, and another. Within seconds, the blackness behind him glowed like a pit of embers. An entire pack was following, silent, relentless, hungry. Frank yammed his foot down. The speedometer broke past 80. The truck shuddered violently, tires screaming against the asphalt. Still, the pack did not fall behind. They fanned out on either side, massive bodies keeping pace with impossible speed. Long tongues lolled from gaping jaws, teeth flashing white and wet in the glare of his lights. One lunged. Its claws scraped the steel door with a screech that tore through Frank's skull, leaving deep gouges that glistened like open wounds. He gritted his teeth, wrestling to steady the rig. One wrong slip and the 18-wheeler would become his coffin of steel. The radio erupted again, this time with laughter. A harsh, rasping laugh, like it rose from a throat scorched in fire. Between the bursts of static and mirth, Frank heard his name, whispered, and then shouted, over and over, each time closer. His heartbeat hammered against his ribs. Sweat poured down his neck, soaking his collar. He kept his eyes locked forward, refusing to look at the glowing eyes swarming beside him. Yet they filled his mirrors, dozens of predatory glares reflecting his every move. Frank no longer needed convincing. He was prey, and the pack was closing in. Highway 666 was no highway at all. It was a ritual, a hunt in which survival was never the prize. The truck wailed in protest, tearing through the night as though it too understood the futility. And deep down, Frank knew the worst had not yet come. The chase twisted into nightmare. Frank crushed the accelerator so hard his foot trembled, yet the needle crawled forward sluggishly, as though an unseen hand were dragging the truck backward. On either side, the hellhounds skimmed the tires, claws sparking fire as they raked the asphalt. One leapt, latching onto the side of the cab, its jaws sinking into the steel as if it were paper. Frank jerked the wheel, the rig lurching violently. The beast fell away, but another replaced it instantly. Their snarls and screeches rose like a chorus, blending with the engine's tortured roar, a sound on the brink of tearing itself apart. The headlights flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed him whole. From the radio came not cries for help, but the cacophony of catastrophe. Metal folding in on itself, brakes shrieking, voices cut short in mid-scream. Frank knew every sound, every detail. They were the same noises from years ago, the night his co-workers vanished without a trace. The cab grew icy. The rearview mirror no longer reflected the road, but shimmered with a raw, blood-red glow, like flames seen through smoke. Within it, warped faces surfaced, melted, disfigured, mouths stretched open in silent screams. Frank's heart pounded violently. His grip on the wheel tore skin, blood smearing the leather. He dared not blink. Suddenly, the highway ahead erupted into light, splitting open with jagged fissures, molten seams blazing like rivers of lava. Tires tore across the cracked surface, smoke and the stench of burning rubber flooding into the cab. The pack howled in unison, a dreadful symphony that shook the desert sky. In that instant, Frank understood he was no longer driving on Earth. The highway had transformed into a vein of living fire, dragging him into its heart. The radio broke once more, its voice low and desiccated, as though the road itself had spoken. "You have arrived." Frank screamed, but his cry was devoured, swallowed by the engine's roar and the unending howl of the hounds that echoed across the wasteland. "Nine, I." The sky grayed with the promise of dawn, but along that stretch of highway, the light never reached. As the first pale rays broke, a husband and wife pulled their car over, unsettled by the acrid stench of something burnt still hanging in the air. In the emptiness of the road lay a scar, the asphalt scorched black, twisted into a jagged streak that seemed to writhe across the pavement. Torn shreds of rubber clung to the shoulder, a few warped fragments of steel glimmered faintly. But nothing else. No oil slick, no blood, no wreckage, only silence. The husband muttered about a truck fire in the night, but his wife shook her head, her gaze fixed on something stranger. The black scar did not fade. It spread, pulsing outward like veins beneath the skin of the highway, seeping deeper into the asphalt as though alive. From the horizon, the wind stirred, carrying not the sound of traffic nor the whisper of desert sand, but a murmur. Low, ragged whispers. Dozens of throats rasping the name of someone unseen. The wife's pulse hammered as she rolled the windows shut, while her husband started the engine, desperate to escape. Their radio crackled, country music shattering into static. A hoarse, frantic voice cut through. They are coming. Run. The wife froze. She knew that voice. It was not a stranger's. It was Frank Harlow, the trucker who had vanished on this highway years ago, now echoing back from the darkness. The couple sped away, leaving the ashen scar smoldering in their wake. Behind them, Highway 666 swallowed every trace, as though nothing had ever happened. Yet in the shadows, the red eyes stirred again, waiting to fasten themselves to the wheels of whoever dared wander next. The highway does not end. It only waits. Naha. Amid the snowbound peaks of the Sierra Nevada, the name Donner lingers like a curse. In the winter of 1846, a wagon party was trapped in the storms, forced to consume one another to survive. Locals whisper that whenever a blizzard rises, the old cabin where they once huddled flares to life again. Inside, withered skeletons sit eternally around the table, beckoning lost travelers to join a feast without end, where the meat is always warm. Isei. The storm came without warning, swallowing the Sierra Nevada in a suffocating white sea. Nathan, leading his group of 3 hikers, fought to find a path through the leaning pines, but the blizzard erased every trace of the trail. Their breaths puffed out in frozen clouds, each step sinking thigh-deep into the snow. Nightfall dropped swiftly, draping the mountains in a dim, oppressive shroud. The cold sliced through skin and bone, numbing Nathan's fingers even through his gloves. Hunger gnawed at them, tremors racked their bodies, and fear seeped in with every step. They no longer knew which direction led back to camp. All that remained was the sensation of being swallowed alive by a labyrinth of ice. Just as despair took hold, a shape loomed through the storm. A weather-beaten cabin, roof sagging under a heavy crown of snow, its doorway nearly buried. Nathan stumbled forward, shouldered open the groaning door, and was met by a gust of air thick with mildew, rotting wood, and the faint tang of old smoke. Inside, weak light filtered through cracks, falling on layers of dust. The cabin was cramped, its timber walls split with age, yet it still bore the trace of human habitation. Around a mold-stained table sat 3 skeletons, slumped as if caught mid-meal. Their hollow sockets bored into the gloom, jaws sagging open as though their final words had frozen in their throats. In the corner, the stone hearth lay long extinguished, though the blackened ash still clung like a shadow. Scattered across the floor were fragments of bone half buried in dirt. The place did not feel abandoned. It felt paused, arranged by some unseen hand only moments before, waiting for the next act to begin. The wind outside shrieked through the gaps in the walls, stretching into a mournful moan. Nathan stood frozen, the chill of the rotting boards seeping into his legs. Death had never left this cabin. It was only waiting for the next soul to step inside. Naya. Night fell faster than they expected. Outside, the blizzard screamed and smothered the entrance, sealing the cabin into their only refuge. Nathan and his 2 companions fed the hearth with rotting timber. The fire cracked to life, casting a jaundiced glow across the warped wooden walls, illuminating the 3 skeletons still seated in silence around the table. The air was thick with damp and mildew, but soon something else began to seep through. At first, it was only the faint tang of ancient ash. Then, as the flames roared brighter, a greasy scent spread, sharp and cloying, like burning fat. Nathan frowned. None of them carried food. And yet, The unmistakable odor of roasting flesh filled the room. A sound stirred near the hearth. At first, the faint pop of splintering wood, then a steady clack, clack, clack. The cadence of a knife striking a cutting board. An old pot balanced on the stones began to tremble, rattling softly before exploding in a metallic clang, as though an unseen hand had hurled a spoon against its side. The froze. The cabin was small, every corner visible, yet no figure stood there. Only the lifeless relics quivered in the firelight, animated by some invisible force. Nathan swallowed hard, telling himself it was only exhaustion conjuring illusions. But then the pot's lid snapped open, revealing ash gone cold, and within it, charred fragments of bone. A ribbon of smoke uncoiled upward, twisting like a beckoning finger before dissolving into the gloom, leaving behind a stench of scorched flesh that thickened the air. Footsteps followed, soft, deliberate, dragging, circling the table. The skeletons remained unmoving in their chairs, but the empty space between them seemed to swell with a darkness more solid than shadow. On the table, a cracked wooden bowl inched forward, scraping until it halted before Nathan. In the shifting firelight, it looked freshly placed, as though by a host eager to serve. The wood even seemed warm to the touch. Outside, the storm howled like a starving beast. Inside, the air pressed heavy and close, suffocating, charged with the quiet anticipation of invisible guests, preparing a feast not meant for the living. By me. The fire roared higher, though they had fed it nothing more. Its sickly glow spilled across the warped walls, stretching shadows into grotesque shapes. For an instant, it seemed the skeletons hunched at the table were stirring, necks lolling forward, then snapping upright again in the blink of an eye. Nathan rubbed his eyes, blaming exhaustion, but when he looked back, the table had transformed. The cracked wooden bowls, empty when they first entered, now brimmed with steaming cuts of meat. Thick, red, glistening slices, releasing a savory scent that clawed at their starved stomachs. Hunger stabbed at Nathan's gut like needles, wearing down every instinct to resist. One of his companions, weaker than the rest, trembled as he reached for a piece. In the firelight, it resembled venison or wild boar, something plausible in these mountains. He shoved it into his mouth, chewing greedily, teeth grinding with frantic abandon. At first, Nathan only felt envy at the sound of flesh between his companion's teeth. But then, the firelight shifted, and Nathan saw it. Embedded in the glossy meat was a scorched fingernail, jutting from pale sinew. A long, charred strand of hair clung to his friend's lip, singed and acrid. The man didn't notice, only chewed faster, eyes bulging, face flushed in delirious satisfaction. Nathan's breath caught, his blood running cold. He tried to scream, but his throat was sandpaper, too dry to form sound. More platters appeared on the table, neatly arranged, still steaming. What had smelled rich now reeked of roasted flesh and burnt blood. The cabin shifted. From the corners rose whispers, at first single syllables, then twisted invitations, lullabies warped and muffled as if sung through soil. Each murmur raised the hair on Nathan's skin, as though the rotten floor itself was pleading. And then came another sound, the wail of a child. Thin, relentless, muffled as though it seeped up from beneath the boards. The air turned brittle with cold. Nathan looked back, and his heart froze. One of the skeletons had moved. Its skull, once slumped, was now lifted, eyeless hollows fixed on him. Its jaw worked soundlessly, yet its rhythm matched the whispers surrounding them. The chair groaned under its shifting weight, as if it prepared to rise. The second friend collapsed into sobs, clutching his head, babbling nonsense. His gaze flicked from the food to the bone figures, and then, in a frenzy, he lunged at the table. He snatched up a half-burnt femur, still streaked with flesh, and sank his teeth in. Blackened blood oozed down his chin, pattering onto the wood below. The cabin shook. Pots and pans clattered like war drums, their tempo quickening, urging. Footsteps, dozens, heavy and hurried, circled them, closing the trap. Nathan understood then. The banquet had never ended. The Donner dead, once starving, once cannibals, remained. The bones were husks. Their spirits lingered, hosting, serving, waiting for strays to join their feast. His vision blurred. In a blink, the cabin swarmed with gaunt phantoms, skin shredded, jaws working, mouths smeared crimson, hands reaching. The skeletons rose from their chairs, vertebrae cracking, heads twisting at impossible angles, welcoming the newcomers. Nathan staggered back, his spine pressed to the icy wall. But he knew there was no escape. The cabin's door was gone, swallowed by the dark. Only the fire remained, burning bright and red, lighting the endless feast of the starving dead who hammered their rhythm, calling him to the table. The cabin was no longer a refuge. It had become a living banquet hall. Fire roared in the hearth, casting the walls in a frenzy of dancing shadows, shapes of shredded bodies swaying and gnawing, though in truth only 3 living men remained. Yet, to Nathan, the room was overflowing with guests. Invisible diners leaned close to their feast, every eyeless stare fixed upon him. The first companion, the one who had eaten first, slumped over the table, his shoulders jerking in violent spasms. His spine jutted sharp against his skin as ragged flesh tore open, exposing the raw meat beneath. Nathan watched in horror as ribs surfaced, splitting through as though some unseen butcher worked from within. But no blood spilled, only the choking perfume of fat sizzling on coals, sweet and rancid, filling every breath. The second friend still clutched his charred bone, but now a hoarse laughter bubbled from his throat. His eyes clouded white, his tongue lolling, black blood dribbling down his chin. When he lifted his head, Nathan recoiled. His face was collapsing inward, cheeks hollowing, teeth lengthening into jagged fangs. Rents in his flesh stretched wider, splitting to reveal a second mouth, yawning across his throat. The whispers surged, clearer than before. Sit with us. Eat with us. Hungry? Lost one? Their voices slithered into Nathan's skull, weaving with the gnawing ache in his belly. His hands trembled. Even knowing the source, the scent of roasting meat made his jaw ache with want, saliva filling his mouth against his will. Across the table, a bowl slid toward him. Inside, a slab of charred flesh still dripped with grease, hissing as it struck the wood. Nathan shook his head, backing away, but the unseen diners pressed closer. Footsteps shuffled all around, slow and circling. Cold breath slid along his neck, whispering hunger. The second friend screamed suddenly, head snapping back with a crack of bone. Then he dropped forward, plunging his face into the platter, tearing chunks with his new-grown fangs. The sound of chewing filled the cabin, obscene and animal. Nathan saw him not as a man, but as the latest guest welcomed to the Donner table. Everywhere, jaws worked, teeth cracked bone. The skeletons had risen now, their empty sockets following Nathan's every movement. Their jaws hung open in wide, grinning invitations. With a gesture, they beckoned. With their silence, they commanded. Nathan doubled over, clutching his stomach as hunger twisted into agony. Something gnawed at him from inside. The meat before him blurred, then sharpened again, shimmering golden, almost holy in its allure. A whisper brushed against his ear, so close it seemed spoken from his own skull. "If you do not eat, you will be eaten." Nathan staggered back until his shoulders struck the wall. He knew the truth now. In the Donner cabin, there was no escape, no mercy. One either sat down to eat, or became the meal. Yee. Nathan forced himself to stand in the circle of shadows, stomach writhing as the scent of roasted flesh clung to every breath. The whispers surged, relentless, pounding like a drumbeat in his skull. "Sit down. Eat. Join us." The skeletal figures circled the table, jaws clattering like funeral drums. The first companion was nothing more than a husk now, face buried in his plate, black smoke curling from his back, as though his body smoldered from within. The second, no longer human, lifted his head, eyes milky white, mouth split wide to his ears. He held out a glistening hunk of red meat toward Nathan, blood dripping onto the wooden floor in steady taps. Nathan croaked a dry scream, shaking his head, but his throat was too parched, his knees buckled with weakness. And then he heard it, another voice whispering beside his ear. Not a stranger's voice, but his own, warped and echoing from the dark. "You've already chosen. The table never runs out of chairs." Strength drained from him. He collapsed into the waiting chair. At once, the empty bowl before him filled, piled high with steaming flesh, the aroma suffocating. The skeletons pounded their bony hands against the table in ghoulish celebration, the clatter rising like a cheer. Firelight flickered over Nathan's face as it changed, eyes sinking into hollows, skin blanched, jaw twitching in spasms. His trembling fingers lifted a morsel to his lips. The moment his teeth pierced the meat, the cabin shuddered as if exhaling in relief. The whispers fell silent, replaced by a chorus of chewing, wet, relentless, eternal. Nathan's own sounds joined them. The grind of teeth through tendon, the convulsions of his throat as he swallowed. Outside, the storm ebbed. Dawn spread its pale shroud across the Sierra Nevada, and the cabin grew still again. Its door remained buried, its timbers dark, no trace of life left within. Only the table endured, set neatly with 3 skeletons, sitting in solemn vigil. On the 4th chair sat a new figure, rigid and pale, eyes hollow, jaw agape in a permanent invitation. The wind slipped through the cracks in the wall, carrying the faintest murmur. "We are still waiting." "Ah, woo." On Staten Island, the legend of Cropsey has never faded. They say he prowls the dense forests and abandoned sewer tunnels where the darkness never recedes. Towering, lurching, and armed with a rusted blade, he stalks the unlucky who dare to enter. Old toys, childish sketches, and pale, staring eyes hidden deep in the shadows are all that remain of those who vanish. And anyone who hears the scrape of metal dragging across the night never returns. Wait? The dirt road that cut into the depths of Staten Island's forest had long since been reduced to a faint scar beneath the weeds. Branches clawed at jackets as the group of 4 teenagers pushed forward, each scratch leaving pale marks like ghostly warnings. The fading afternoon light bled weakly through the canopy, falling in sickly patches across their path, as if the forest itself whispered that they should turn back. Willowbrook Camp revealed itself after a bend in the trail. Rows of sagging cabins with collapsed roofs and walls that peeled like rotting skin. The playground at the entrance stood frozen in silence, where a rusted swing swayed lazily, creaking in the breeze with a sound too hollow, too human. Nearby, a warped steel slide jutted upward, its base sunken deep into damp soil, like the headstone of a childhood long buried. Inside the first cabin, dust hung so thick that every step sent clouds rising like pale smoke. Broken bunk beds lay scattered in heaps, their frames twisted. In the corner slumped a gutted teddy bear, stuffing spilling from its torn belly like an unhealed wound. On the stained wall, faint crayon drawings still lingered, childish stick figures holding hands beneath the looming shadow of something impossibly tall. The children said nothing, but their eyes clung to every fragment left behind. One boy picked up a tiny tricycle, its rusted wheels squealing with each turn. The sound echoed through the hollow cabin, absurdly small, yet unbearably heavy, as if carried from a past that refused to rest. The sun dipped lower, smothered by the tree line, and shadows swallowed the camp. The air thickened, damp and cold, seeping into lungs until each breath felt stolen. From somewhere distant, a crow shrieked, a harsh, broken cry, then went silent, leaving a suffocating stillness. One of the teens tugged open the warped door of the storage shed. The stench of mildew rolled out to greet them. Piled inside were forgotten relics of play. Dolls with fractured faces, toy trucks missing wheels, a child's cap stained with a dark rust-red bloom. On a crooked wooden shelf leaned a stack of photographs, their images blurred by time. The children leaned closer. Each picture showed camp kids lined up in uniform, smiling with mouths too stiff, eyes too empty. A gust of wind slipped through the cracked boards, making the photos quiver. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire camp exhaled, heavy and tired. And in that instant, the intruders understood. They were not the first to wander here in decades. Something had remained. Something that watched, patient and hungry, from just beyond the dark. Night had swallowed Staten Island's woods whole, pressing darkness against every breath. The teenagers moved with flashlights in hand, their beams slicing thin arcs across the ruins of an abandoned bathhouse on the camp's edge. Hingis groaned as a sagging wooden door surrendered, opening into a chamber that reeked of mold and stagnant air. Broken tiles glistened with pools of black water, each reflecting the wavering light like liquid mirrors. On the peeling walls, crude chalk scrawls spread in tangled clusters, dozens of small figures drawn hand in hand, circling a towering shape with arms that scraped the ground. Its face was nothing more than a hollow smear of darkness. The group froze, beams quivering as they swept across the room. Every wall bore the same tableau, children gathered at the side of a looming skeletal giant. By the sinks, dark stains had dried into the concrete, trailing downward like veins of rust. They clung stubbornly, cracked into the floor as if time itself had tried and failed to erase them. The air shifted as a cold gust slithered in, carrying with it the sour stench of damp fabric, burnt plastic, and something far more rotten. In one corner lay a discarded Polaroid camera, its body choked with dust. One of the kids lifted it, finding a few photos wedged inside. Under the flashlight's glare, faces emerged. Children smiling with distorted mouths, eyes empty sockets of pale gray. In one photo, behind the group of children, something massive loomed. Its outline was blurred, wrong, as though it had bled into the picture from another world. Then came a sound, soft at first, leaking upward through the pipes beneath the floor. A hiss, faint but alive, shifting into something higher, sharper. Laughter. A chorus of giggles rising and falling, echoing as if dozens of unseen children were playing just beneath their feet. The tiles trembled. Ripples spread across the stagnant puddles. The teenagers stared at one another, wide-eyed and mute. A flashlight beam swept toward the far end of the corridor. There, fresh chalk marks gleamed brighter than the others, drawn with unsettling clarity. And pressed into the dust beside them was a tiny handprint, wet, glistening, impossibly recent. The room fell silent, as though holding its breath. No wind, no birds, no sound but the hammering of their own hearts. And then it came, rising from the bowels of the tunnels below, the scrape of metal, dragging slow and heavy, rattling through the brick walls, announcing something that had already begun to move. That dragging metal sound pulsed again and again, steady as a death beat beneath the earth. The teenagers tried to pull away from the bathhouse, but their steps betrayed them, drifting toward the direction of the noise, as though something unseen guided their feet. Wind shrieked through the shattered slats, tilting flashlight beams into fractured arcs, illuminating shadows that seemed to close tighter with every step. Behind the rotting cabins they found it, a sewer hatch left slightly ajar. From the gap rose a chill so sharp it felt like ice in their lungs, carrying the rancid stench of carrion rotting in mud. The iron cover was streaked with rust, and below it yawned a ladder that vanished into endless dark. They shone their lights downward. The walls gleamed wet, veined with moss, every drip echoing like a clock tick counting down. Small handprints smeared the slick surface, layer upon layer of tiny palms, as if children had climbed down one after another. Some were fresh, wet enough that water still trickled in thin rivulets. One of them, braver or more foolish than the rest, set a foot on the ladder. The rungs groaned with a metallic scream under the weight. One by one, the others followed, swallowed into the dark. With every step deeper, the sound grew louder, not distant anymore, but crawling close. The deliberate scrape of something immense dragging its blade. It moved slowly, arrogantly, as though certain that prey could never escape. The tunnel stretched before them, endless and waterlogged. Stagnant pools lapped at their ankles, stinking of rust and mold. Abandoned relics littered the sludge, the bent frame of a stroller, a child's shoe gnawed apart, the headless remains of stuffed animals drifting like corpses. When the flashlights swept the walls, the chalk drawings appeared again. This time sharper, crueler, children with eyes washed white, clutching hands around a bent, towering figure whose grasp held a scythe. The whispers returned, clearer now, flitting through the tunnel like breath against their ears. High-pitched giggles swelled and faded, skipping from wall to wall, circling them, crawling under their skin. The water rippled, though nothing moved. Then the beam of a flashlight swept forward and froze. At the tunnel's end, a shape stood motionless. Too tall, shoulders hunched, head canted, unnaturally to the side. Arms dangled near the ground, one fist clutching a wide, corroded blade. The steel's tip scraped across the concrete with a shriek that shivered the air. The light trembled over his face. Blurred flesh, mottled and uneven, as if dragged too far across bone. A face without balance, without mercy. And from the hollow sockets of his eyes, twin glints flared back like a predator's in the night. The teenagers froze. Breaths caught. Hearts hammered against ribs like prisoners against walls. And then, as though the light itself had awakened him, the figure moved. Lurching, limping, yet impossibly quick. The scythe shrieked louder, grinding against concrete, the sound swelling until it rattled the walls. Water splashed violently with each heavy step, as if the entire tunnel were gasping, choking in rhythm with his approach. A scream tore loose, shattering the silence. Panic surged, and the group bolted, flashlights scattering wild beams across the dripping walls. Behind them, the dragging blade struck harder, faster, echoing through the cavern. And woven through the metallic shrieks was laughter. Thin, cruel laughter in many voices, the laughter of children long broken. Footsteps thundered behind them, heavy and relentless, each one reverberating through the marrow of their bones. The teenagers stumbled through the twisting tunnels, flashlights flaring wildly against the walls. The chalk drawings multiplied with every turn, little figures grinning with mouths stretched too wide, while the looming, hunched giant grew larger, swallowing entire walls, as if the tunnel itself was painting the hunter that stalked them. Filthy water splashed cold against their legs, sharp as ice. From the cracks above, the wind hissed, but tangled in the draught came whispers. Children's voices. Don't run. Stay. Come play with us. The words spiraled through the corridor, impossible to trace, near and far, all at once. Suddenly, one of them slipped. A flashlight clattered across the flooded floor, spinning, then landing with its beam locked onto the tunnel's far end. He was there. Tall, skeletal shoulders twisted, one arm dangling lower than the other. The scythe scraped the ground with a metallic groan, each drag louder than breath. The group shrieked, scrambling to their feet, but it was too late. Cropsey lunged forward. A long arm swung, the blade slicing through the dark. No blood, no spray. Only the hollow scream of steel cleaving air. The light flickered, died, then surged back. One of them was gone. Only a torn backpack bobbed in the filthy water. Panic tore through the survivors. They bolted deeper, yet the tunnel coiled endlessly, stretching like a labyrinth with no exit. Every corner they turned, cold wind rushed from ahead, carrying shrill giggles that echoed like knives. On the walls, the handprints smeared thicker, wetter, as though pressed fresh by unseen palms. A flashlight beam veered right into a circular chamber. Its domed ceiling dripped with condensation, and scattered chairs lay broken in heaps. Shredded stuffed animals slumped in corners, while crooked frames dangled from the walls. At the room's center, a long table stood beneath a rotting green cloth, set with broken plates and children's toys arranged like offerings. The group stopped, gasping. The air felt swollen, pressing against their lungs. The room was waiting. Then, from behind the table, he emerged. Cropsey, Ma. No longer a shadow. Whole. His body warped, his face sagging like wax melting under flame. Deep sockets burned with a feral gleam, catching the flashlight's jittering beams. In his grasp, the scythe tilted, its blade mottled with rust and streaks of dried red. He moved closer, halting, deliberate, confident. The way a predator closes the space when it knows the corner has already been sealed. Each step struck like a drumbeat inside their chests. The air chilled, thickened, suffocating. They backed against the wall, slick with moss, nowhere left to run. Then, all at once, the picture frames fell. Glass shattered across the floor. From behind the broken panes, children's faces stared out. Eyes rolled white, mouths split into jagged grins. The voices came next, hundreds of them, threading directly into their skulls. "Sit down. The feast is ready." The flashlights flickered, then died. The chamber collapsed into absolute dark. And in that void, only one sound remained. The long, deliberate sweep of a scythe, sliding across concrete. Slow, certain, inescapable. Nyanya. The blackness swallowed the entire chamber, so thick it weighed down every breath. There was no light anymore, only the steady drip of water, the frantic thump of hearts, and above all the unending scrape of a scythe dragged across concrete. One of them screamed, flicking a lighter to life. The tiny flame stuttered, casting a trembling glow over Cropsy's face, just inches away. Flesh sagged like melted wax, one socket hollow, the other gleaming with a feral yellow spark. His breath stank of rust and rot, the stench of blood clinging to every exhale. The scythe swung. A scream was cut short. The flame snuffed out. Silence, then the splash of water, as though the tunnel had just swallowed another soul whole. The survivors staggered forward, plunging deeper into the maze. But the tunnels weren't the same anymore. The paths twisted endlessly, corridors folding into each other like a nightmare with no escape. Every footstep echoed unnaturally long, as though the ground itself refused to carry them closer to safety. Behind them, the dragging steel sang on the concrete, sometimes distant, sometimes right at their heels. Cropsy was playing. Another stumbled, their flashlight tumbling into the water. Its glow flickered just enough to reveal the figures. Rows of children standing shoulder to shoulder in the tunnel. Faces chalk white, eyes hollow, mouths cracked into rigid smiles. Tiny hands reached out, whispering, "Stay with us." When Cropsy stepped forward, the children's shapes melted into him, their pale faces vanishing into the grotesque swell of his form. His arm lifted. Another body was gone. At last, only one remained. Breath ragged, eyes wide with hopeless terror, they ran on and on. Then, light, a faint glimmer ahead. An open manhole cover, spilling the glow of street lamps into the dark. The survivor clawed their way toward it, trembling fingers curling over the icy rung of the ladder. But the darkness thickened behind them, pressing close, heavy with the stench of rust and decay. A hand, long, deformed, skin hanging loose, closed over their shoulder. Cold breath brushed their ear. For the briefest moment they looked up and saw safety just above. A police cruiser rolling by, red and blue lights painting across the manhole's lip. They tried to scream, but no sound came. The scythe fell. Darkness sealed shut. Above ground, Staten Island lay quiet beneath the night sky. No one knew what had happened below, where children's laughter echoed once more, mingling with the scrape of steel on concrete. And the legend of Cropsy had never ended. No.